Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejan Sarowick. Sejan?
Coming back from a mute yawn. Sorry.
That's
Hey,
okay. Well,
you were like, "Hey, let's go," and my body was like, "Wait, one last thing." But luckily, I was able to hit the mute before it came out.
excellent. Well, while you're dealing with your mute problems, which they seem to be moot at this point, I just need to lead off with saying I was going to try to watch Pinocchio, but I didn't watch Pinocchio. And I
That's
apologize
okay.
to everybody who wanted
No,
me to watch Pinocchio.
it's
But
better for your sanity, and considering things going on in your house right now, a wooden boy on strings might not be the best.
yeah, but I did watch some other movies that I hope we're going to be able to talk about. But if not, know that that's a trailer for later on this month. Because I know you started Hollow watching, right? You're one day into Hollow watching, or what's
Well,
going
so
on,
remember,
Steven?
Hollow watching is not as intense as the Christmas bad vent season. We don't do a movie a day for Hollow watching. What it is if we're going to do a movie, we make sure that it is some spook oriented in some fashion. So like we usually that works out to about like a movie a week, or and then as far as like television shows, like we'll do like Halloween episodes that we maybe have put off and things like that.
Oh, okay, cool.
A lot of Brooklyn Nine-Nine replays in the house. Let's put it that
Now,
way.
I don't think this year though, right? Unless are you a Peacock subscriber?
No, I am not a Peacock subscriber at this time, but like let's not act like that's the only way to watch the things you want to watch, which I feel like is like a fair thing to say in the new landscape of the streaming services. You know, like I I don't want to get into the same rut of everybody complaining about how there's too many of them. That's not my issue. My issue is that they don't want to, none of them want to play nice together, right? Like it's not just that there's like 1,000 streaming services, it's that they all want to act like they're the only place people want to go, and that can't possibly be the case, and they're going to find that doesn't work, because the big reason I say this is just to continue on a bit of a conversation from last week. Started to make those hard decisions about what are we going to keep and what are we not, and there's a lot of streaming services that really want me to be the only place that I'm going to pay them to go to for one particular show, and you're not going to make the cut if that's the case. Like, I am more likely to pick a streaming service that has a wider variety of stuff, even if it's not like tops things that I want, but I'll be able to fill more of my time with it, you know?
I mean, for me, the first one that I would have to hold on to is Prime Video, because I get so many other benefits by subscribing to Prime Video. And they
Yes,
got a lot
that I
of
will say.
stuff on there. Like, that's not one, like, the only reason I bring it up is because we recently switched everything in this house over from Fire Stick to basically streaming via Windows, be that with Xbox Series X's on a couple of the TVs, or just like, well, my computer has an HDMI out, and I'll move it to that. So
I
like,
understand that Google broke your heart this week, but the ways in which your family avoids using any type of like Google service is amazing to me.
well, I mean, but it was Amazon Fire Stick that we moved away from, and while we could have gone to
Yeah,
Google,
that's what I mean. Is you did the choice to not just go to a simple like Google service.
well,
I mean,
because it's not the difference between from what I understand, and I know that the new Chromecast does have sort of a UI, and you can use it. You don't just need to stream to it. The prospect of streaming to the device is too much for my parents. They want to be able to turn on the device and have that device access to things that they use.
sure, yeah, it's an easier compartmentalization for sure.
Yeah.
I get that. I mean, part of that is just because of the way that that's the market has trained them, but
Yeah,
we don't have to
exactly.
get into that.
And it'd be one thing if they could move past it, but also, like, we're a family that tries to use their electronics till they cannot work anymore. So if we were trying to cast to a Chromecast, I think the most advanced phone that a Decker currently has is my father, and that's
Yeah.
because we ordered him an iPhone SE for Christmas, and between the time that we ordered it and it arrived, they announced the 3, so he got the newer iPhone SE. So like it's just like a little bit better than my iPhone SE, because I'm just like, oh, it's gonna be the exact same as mine, and it'll be fine because I know what I can do. So his is just like a little bit better, just because of the way that things happen to go in the house, which is
Yeah.
fine. But that's the most up to date cellular device in this house. My
Yeah, no,
sister and
yeah,
mother are both on iPhone, are both on Galaxy 7Es. I think
No, you guys have
like
just made the weird like multiverse choice. Like the other side of this coin is everybody instead of going with Apple doesn't go with Google but goes with Windows instead.
yeah. Well, it's not so
And you've
much.
developed this like weird Windows ecosystem in your house that I don't understand at
It's
all.
because Dale had a Windows phone in 2011, and somehow it has just become the norm. It has to have been past 2011, 2013. Sorry, I get those 2 years confused because they're both odd. Anywho, but yeah, so since switching to that, what I realized is while Prime Video felt like just such a thing because we were on the Fire Stick, how important it is to have access to it on that Xbox Series X that my father is using as his main like streaming entertainment rig.
Well, again, I will
Yeah,
say it's probably because you guys were using it so much that that is the one that just makes the most sense to you. You like the library because it's what you know is there, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Because I just cannot get behind Prime. I think their selection sucks personally, and on top of that, everything I want to watch, I put it on and suddenly it has ads because it turns out it's
Because it's
freebie or some
freebie
shit.
instead.
Like the
That is
ways
the
that they don't
problem.
separate shit, their
That is the
UI
big
sucks.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I just cannot get behind it. And then I get to have the benefit of saying I also don't support Amazon when I make this choice too, right? Which is just icing on the cake for my smugness.
Especially as somebody who has like real world experience with why you would hate Amazon.
Yeah, I mean,
Having
not
worked
that.
there briefly.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm not going to like claim some type of more deserved hatred of this company than anybody else, but you're not wrong that I've experienced some
yeah, you're
shit
not
that
going to
definitely.
claim it, but it doesn't change the fact that like I can look at Amazon and say terrible company because of all the things I see from the outside. You can look at Amazon and say, "Oh, you have no fucking idea." Because you've seen it.
Yeah.
Hello from the other side, Adele styles. But that's it. I mean, then the other one. I mean, the real reason I bring up the Brooklyn Nine-Nine of it all is the fact that, yes, I too want to do the Hollow watching, watch those Halloween episodes because they are so good. Like, it is one of the things that Brooklyn Nine-Nine definitely excelled at. And
Mhm.
I want to make sure that everybody knows it ain't on Hulu anymore. As of
Yeah.
October 1st, you can't watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine on Hulu. It is a Peacock exclusive. And it is not
Even the Fox season
even all, well, the Fox
seasons.
seasons, the first six
Yeah.
seasons. No, they're all over on Peacock now. And it's crazy. It's one of those situations where it said that it was expiring, and I'm like, well, I don't know if that's true or not. And then it was just gone, and I'm like, okay, well, just picking it up from where we were at Peacock. But then the more important thing to talk about, because I have had some, let's say, new issues emerge with cop entertainment on television.
Oh, okay.
That is
Shit, man.
that I am willing to talk about because it's gotten to that point where I understand. Like John Oliver did that whole big thing about Law and Order and how it is just Copaganda. So the fact that like 80% of America uses Law and Order as their basis for how they think the justice system works is terrifying. Like that's
Right.
just terrifying information. And then he goes on like an even deeper dive with it. But then something like Big Sky.
It would be unethical of us at this time to not point out that we have on this very show, like jokingly and not so much jokingly, talked about using Law and Order as kind of our basis of understanding. So like we are just as guilty of that,
Oh.
right? Like
Yeah, dude, like what we talked about when the Law and Order new season started up, right? After I think like a 10-year hiatus, I said like watching it again, it's not as good because in the time since Law and Order went off the air to its resurrection, we have learned so much about how that's not how the justice system works.
Sure,
So
right.
the
And the
fact-
thing is like we should have known that all along. I just wanted to
Right.
make sure that we were pointing
Oh, yeah,
the
we are
finger at
not
ourselves
without
as well
sin.
and all of
We
that.
are not.
Yeah,
I mean, most of my order side of it is based on A Few Good Men, and that is highly specialized military law that is being practiced in that movie.
I mean, I even take kind of umbrage with the idea of like people who have seen like Social Network. I was going to say the Facebook movie and sound like a real old man who have seen Social Network too many times and use that as some basis because like there is the like the verisimilitude of that movie where it's like, oh, this is based on actual court filings and he's using the language that supposedly they said and using the legal language that is present in that paperwork. And A Few Good Men is like that, but kind of like the diet version of that in some places. And so like even that is problematic, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like,
no.
and that is shit where literally it is pulled directly out of court documents and then put on the page for people to say. That still doesn't give you a good idea of what this system truly is like.
Well,
Right?
it's still fiction. Let's look at the big one, the
Right.
one that's blowing up right now. Is Blonde, the Marilyn Monroe movie that released on Netflix? That honestly you should not watch under any circumstances if you want to like have respect for Marilyn Monroe, because so much of that movie is fabrication presented under the banner of based on true events that like the number of articles I have seen related to Blonde about how this never fucking happened. Please understand that these are just parts of entertainment put into this movie that people are going to watch and then think that this is something that Marilyn Monroe did. Turning
It's moments like this where I don't know if we should be like angry or like really keep an eye on the Coen brothers for the shit that they pulled with Fargo. Really fucked with a lot of people.
I mean, it's yeah. They were very honest about it though. Whenever they were asked to say
but
it,
that doesn't change the number of people out there that think Fargo is a retelling of a true story. Because as we've talked about so many times on the show, what an audience takes in is never what the artist intended, right?
Yeah.
Like,
right. But like for Blonde, turning all of her miscarriages into abortions, that's fucked up. Like that's just fucked up storytelling.
Yep. Well, especially because like, what is that? Like that starts to give you some kind of weird like idea of what the creators are attempting to do.
Yeah, what their messaging is. Yeah.
Anybody out there that thinks that movies aren't politicized in any way, like you're not watching movies. Like you're just ignoring
everything is politicized, unfortunately.
Right. And so like the creative decision to take like a literal medical condition and like flip it into like a victim, like taking it from a victim story to that's just crazy. That's just nuts. Sorry, we're starting to talk about abortion and it's getting me so riled up.
Well, because like, yeah, no, it's everything that's going on in the country right now. And then you see a movie like that takes, I mean, the big one, right? Like the known one is her first pregnancy was endopic. So it had not, the egg was fertilized in the fallopian tubes. It never made its way to her uterus. So like, that's why the body rejected the pregnancy. And like, most people like nowadays that would just be like, your baby is stuck here, we need to take care of it, otherwise it could cause bigger problems for you. Like we didn't know what we knew about endopic pregnancies when it happened to Marilyn Monroe. But for them to
70
say,
years ago?
maybe a little, it was the 60s. So yeah, about 50 almost. I don't know the exact.
Are you kidding me?
I know, I'm the math guy, right? 50 is closer to it because we're early in it. So I don't even know. Never mind. Whatever. But yeah, when that occurred and everything there. So then in the current political climate, right, where we literally had Roe v. Wade overturned and everything that's happened as a result of that, to turn something that was this real heart-wrenching moment in the life of Norma Jean into like she got an abortion, like fuck you. In a way that, like, I don't want to support your movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry to go off on it.
Didn't they also, I mean, just a side story to that whole thing, aren't they the ones that also just got in trouble because a lot of, like behind the scenes nude stuff came out about the main actress there in playing Marilyn Monroe?
Yeah, the whole movie, the movie's just mired in controversy, but, like, the one that started it, what kicked it off, was all these people coming forward and saying, so this stuff never happened in real life.
We learned some real bad lessons from fucking Shia LaBeouf and Harry Styles there. Like the ways in which people have been looking at the controversy on what's the full name of that one? The Olivia Wilde movie that everybody's can't and Florence Pugh.
I can think of
everything about this movie.
I don't know the title of the movie because I know I'm never gonna watch it, and that's just like
Leave Me Alone, hubby, or some shit.
Stop
I don't know.
Staring,
but like,
or don't talk to. I don't know the name of it.
This is great.
We do owe it as a service after we finish.
But like the
this
ways
up
in which
to
people
get
look
the
at that
proper
movie.
title.
Yeah, but the ways that people look at that movie and look at the controversy of that movie, forgetting that a lot of it is based very heavily, very early on in like Shia LaBeouf has a really terrible history of abuse on behind the scenes, and like and certain people behind the scenes on the other direction not wanting to work with him, and like that is very serious issues. And like we can talk all that we want about like him and Olivia Wilde like trading bars on social media and in subsequent interviews and stuff like that. But like and like the funny shit about like, oh, Harry Styles might have spit on Chris Pine at the like that stuff's great and all, but like we're forgetting that the entire thing here is that like sometimes people don't want to work with abusers like Shia LaBeouf. Like maybe that conversation should happen, but we've lost all of that now in this whole other conversation about like people that just can't get along. And it's just like that's not what's actually happening here, guys.
Yeah, is that's one of those movies that I'm not going to follow the controversy. It feels like reality television, but like not the scripted type of reality television that I also hate. Like, or maybe it is. Maybe it's all like a gross marketing campaign to get people interested in this movie that, like, by all other accounts, like people who've seen it say that it doesn't make sense from an editing standpoint. So, like,
Yeah, I've heard Florence Pugh is you know great as ever in it, and beyond that, the movie is a bit of a mess.
yeah.
Don't worry, darling. By the way, is the movie we're talking about. I had to get it pulled
No,
up.
I know you.
But between
I was gonna make
but
sure
between
you
his
did.
year of My Policeman and Don't Worry, Darling, Harry Styles is apparently just making a real name for himself in some big name stinkers.
Can't wait for
You know,
Eternals too. Right? Because
hey
he's
man,
Star Fox, isn't
like
he?
I was gonna say, as somebody that like sits on the you know sits on the throne of I'll watch anything and I won't judge it before I see it. I'll probably I'll probably watch Don't Worry, Darling one day and fucking love this movie. But like we cannot help but public perception of this is like really problematic, and we've completely lost the thread of like this entire thing started with like not wanting there to be these terrible people on set making these terrible decisions, and it snowballed into just this like media shitstorm. And we've now learned from that, like, hey, that can actually turn into views for an otherwise mediocre film. So, like, let's just play that shit up when the movie's not going so well, right?
I mean, we say that you blame them, but the real blame for that is Morbius, right? Morbius is another one of those things where, like, mediocre
I didn't
movie,
want to touch your precious Morbius. I'm sorry, Devin.
It's not precious to me. I enjoyed Morbius, and I'm not sorry about it. But I like the character of Michael Morbius. I like him. I like the character. I don't know.
I really like the comic book character, Michael Morbius.
Yeah.
I've told you before, I've tried to watch this movie so many times that it's just so unwatchable to me.
Yeah, no,
I need somebody to watch it with me. I need friends. That's what we need to do. Maybe you and I need to do like a watch together some night.
Well, I'm always willing to get my Morbin on, right? It's Morbin time. Yeah, but that's the other thing.
There we go.
Right?
Drop the meme. Get the points.
Drop the meme. Collect our internet points. Feed the chicken. But yeah, but to go back to it, right? So the whole Law and Order of it all, right? And then Brooklyn Nine-Nine is now on Peacock. And the thing that really bothered me, what really got under my skin this week, right? We're in fall TV season, right? It's the craziest thing in the world to me that there are new fall shows that are out. We haven't really gotten a chance to talk about them because of what our recording schedule is like these last couple of weeks. But it is a fact that fall TV season has started. And even though every year, and it's only been 2 years, but every year when the show ends, we look at each other and all the Deckers go, we're not watching the next season. Big Sky is this fucking genius marketing where they premiere 2 weeks before every other show. So you're like, oh, it's new TV, and like, dude, I kind of want to watch it, right? Like, screw you, ABC, I'm going to watch it. And already, Big Sky Season 3, I'm like tired of the Copaganda of it all. Yeah. Because Jenny Hoyt, who is like, she was gearing up to be the new sheriff of Montana, wherever they are in Montana. I think it's Helena. Like, she was doing it. They brought in Jensen Ackles at the end of last season, and now he's there, and it looks like he's just going to be the sheriff. So first of all, as somebody who's never watched Supernatural, I prefer Walker to Jensen Ackles in Big Sky. I'm going to say
it's funny that he's kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah, he's doing
also, you should, like, you could joke about Supernatural all you want, but he did also just come off of a pretty much critically acclaimed, universally loved season of The Boys as well. Like we can't ignore that.
I don't watch The Boys.
He played the Captain America surrogate of The Boys in the latest season, and in the comics has a pretty important storyline, and in the show equally important. And like by all accounts, just fucking blew it away. So like he just kind of rocked that as well.
Here's a funny story about
Also,
The
Dark Angel.
Boys.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's fine. Here's a funny story about The Boys. Hopefully it's funny. I was scrolling through Twitter and it was a GIF and it said A-Train kills Gloria, I think is what it said. Potential spoilers, I don't know The Boys. And I thought that like a woman was going to get killed by a train. And then I watched it, and I'm just like, "Oh no! They mean this is from The Boys." I'm like, "Oh, this is really well shot. How is this woman going to get killed by a train? What stupidity is going to happen?" And then and then it ended, and I'm like, "Oh, A-Train, popular character from Amazon Prime, The Boys, kills
not
her."
a train. Yeah, right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because there wasn't like a hyphen. It just said A-Train. And I'm like, oh my God, this poor woman's going to get killed by a train. And they're so happy right now. Is it going to derail and fall off? I had no idea how a train was going to kill this woman. That's pretty much my extent of The Boys. And like one step further than that, The Boys is doing every fucking thing it can to get Devon Decker to watch it. You put Aya Cash in a show, I'm pretty much going to show up because I'm a big fan of Traffic Light. And all of those characters from all the actors from Traffic Light, I have followed their careers from the wreckage of the 13 episodes of Traffic Light. And Aya Cash on The Boys, and I'm like, it's still not enough for me. I'm sorry, Aya Cash. Please forgive me.
I just can't, for such an Amazon Prime fanboy over there, like the fact that you're not in on all the Amazon Prime
I don't
shows.
watch any of the Amazon Prime shows. I haven't done Invincible. I don't need to do a list. I don't do Reacher. I don't watch any of the shows, but like Amazon Prime I also get the 2-day shipping. So it's like a nice thing. And occasionally when I'm looking for a product, there it is on Amazon Prime and I don't need to go further than it. So it's nice. It's always like kind of a nice surprise when I search Prime Video and like, oh, the movie I wanted to watch is already available there. And part of me paying for 2 days shipping.
Okay, are you done feeding Papa Bezos?
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I do know. Well, that's the thing is that you brought up The Boys of Jensen Ackles. I didn't know that he was in it. But yeah, so he's in Big Sky. And one of the big stories, huge spoilers for season 2 of Big Sky, this show that I feel like I might be the only person watching too, which is really crazy when I say I'm never going to watch it again. And then one step beyond, like it still keeps coming back for some reason. Somehow I'm feeding my own punishment. But they introduced a character played by Jamie Lynn Sigler, Meadow from Sopranos, in the second season. Her name is Tanya, and she got wrapped up with a drug cartel in the second season. And then by the end of it, seeing how this drug cartel that was a family, it was a family unit that ran drugs together, how there was no loyalty even within the family, she realized that, like, I don't want to be working with these people. And then one step beyond that, their like lead assassin Dono, like they had grown to have an affection for each other, so she convinced him to stop killing people and to run away from the drug cartel with her. And now she's a legitimate businesswoman who like owns a diner and is trying to sell real estate in Montana. And the sheriff going to her and being like, I know you're bad, and all I need is one reason to lock you up forever. And I'm just like, that's fucking bad policing. That's bad policing. That is exactly what we have been trying to talk about with things like defund the police and everything. Well, like a cop.
Well, but keep in mind, like the ways in which we have built up police heroism is it's never the cops that are doing the right thing that are the good guys.
Yeah, I know.
At best case scenario, the cop wanting to follow the rules, the clean cop, is the joke character. I mean, look at something like, for all of my love of Punisher, like the introduction of the character of Soap, right? Like, and this idea being that he's a clean cop on the force, but the joke being that he's incompetent, right? And that's, there's ways that Punisher makes up for that in other ways in terms of like bad policing. So I'm not going to rag on it for too long, but like that is the stereotype, right? Like that's what they're calling attention to with that character / kind of promoting with that character is like you're either a bad cop and like you're doing the right thing, but for the wrong reasons, or the wrong thing for the right reasons, or at the end of the day, you're a good cop, but that just makes you the butt of every joke. Like there's no way to be the good cop and also be the hero of the story.
That's a good point, because even something like Big Sky has the character of Papernak, who is this great character, but everybody's like, oh, he's too eager. He's such a suck up. And it's just like, yeah, but all along the way, he's also doing good police work. Like, he's
Yeah.
following his instincts. And they make fun of the fact that he has a minivan, like he drives a minivan. But then when they need to tail a federal agent in an episode, he's like, yeah, you're not making fun of my minivan now, right? Because nobody's going to think I'm a cop in this minivan. Like, he's a joke, but then he's also, like, consistently a good police officer. It's one of the only good things that Big Sky is doing. Big Sky is also weird because it follows Jenny Hoyt, who's like deputy and next in line to be sheriff, and it follows private investigators, to the fact of like, when the cops can't do it on their own because they have to deal with the rules, we have these private investigators who can take care of business. The show's
Right.
weird. The show's weird. But the whole speech that Jenny gave to Tanya about, like, you used to work with drug dealers, and I don't care how clean you are now. There's something dirty about you, and I just can't wait to slap the irons on you. And it's just like, fuck that. And it was just it was the first moment since all of this stuff that I was really watching one of these cop shows, and I'm just like, you're a bad police officer. Why am I supposed to care about you?
Yeah, man.
It's,
I mean,
it's,
you know,
yeah.
I'm not going to rag you for taking this long to get here, but this is something that
Well,
that
I
is
mean, I don't
definitely out
watch.
there.
I will say that I don't watch as much as like
Sure,
my
I just mean
parents
that there
watching
are people that
Chicago
are,
PD, and when I see
yeah,
episodes of that, and I'm like, I don't care how fucking good Hoyt is, right? The fact that he takes people to the silos to beat them up to get information from them, I can tell you right now that that Dick Wolf character is a bad cop. Right.
yeah,
But then something
yeah,
like The Rookie, which they are very much on patrol and reactionary to things that they see out on patrol, like that one feels good because they're not looking for danger. Usually they're having pithy conversations in their cars, and then they see like somebody breaking into a car, and that's like the inciting action of it. And
sure.
and
Just
that's
keep in mind that what that does is that just creates a sense that crime is everywhere, so we need the police to be ever present. Like there's propaganda
oh,
in
it's
it
all
all, man.
propaganda.
Like,
I understand that. But
right,
that type of cop show, I find it easier to watch now in lieu of everything that we now know and everything that we're seeing. And
yeah,
the fact that like that's almost an epidemic that also isn't going away. Is just like cops not realizing that their actions also have consequences and that they should be under scrutiny as well. Like
right.
that hasn't gotten any better since we've been focusing a microscope and magnifying glass on their actions. But like I can watch something like The Rookie and enjoy it, but shows where like the person who I'm supposed to be rooting for is like flagrantly flaunting just how bad a police officer they are, and the fact that like they're going to be prejudicial and they're going to be looking for this person to do something that they deem wrong in order to dole out punishment. I'm not really interested in that anymore. And
Sure.
that's just that was the big
I
reveal.
mean,
That
it's an
came.
interesting, yeah, and it's an interesting trope to really dig into, because one could also argue that there is a vein in film and entertainment, like, right, where the idea being that because the system is so corrupt and broken, it takes a cop that doesn't play by the rules, or a person like you mentioned, like private investigator or some fucking insurance adjuster, somebody, there's somebody with some type of authority that suddenly gets to like step in, and because for A, B, and C, because the system is corrupt, not following the rules is more likely to be the quote unquote right thing, right? But it all ends up feeding the same beast, where it becomes this really problematic view of just how policing should be, what type of policing should be allowed, and what should be tolerated from people in these positions. It becomes that thing that we love on this show, where we talk about like nostalgia and culture and all of that stuff, and how it feeds this idea of our understanding of how the world works, no matter how much we can look at a thing and say, well, this isn't real, it's a TV show. But it doesn't matter when every TV show you watch for 10 years feeds you the same kind of thing. Like at some point you start kind of just adopting that concept to real life, right? And like policing is a perfect example of that. The ways in which people think that the law works because of shows like Law and Order is horrendous.
Yeah, and And it all boils down to the fact, and what I really wanted to celebrate this week is, yes, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is no longer on Hulu. And what we had mostly rewatched before its move to Peacock was that first season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And so much of that first season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine has aged poorly. Like more than poorly. Like that first season is disgusting. And so when I lost it to Peacock, I'm like, I don't know if I need to finish up with Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I think I got the point. But then I have Peacock, right? My father pays for Peacock specifically, and I have access to it because they're very good about like multiple people using it at the same time. They're still in the introductory price section of the game, NBC with Peacock, where they just want a bunch of users. They don't care if like someone is a user and two people are using the account at the same time.
Yeah, they haven't gotten there. They will, but they haven't gotten there
They'll
yet.
get there. I mean, the craziest thing with Peacock is the fact that each month it is 2 charges. We are charged the preliminary membership fee, and then like a couple of hours later, and it's happened actually a day later, we're charged the premium fee. Even though we signed up for premium from the beginning. Like, it's the weirdest thing that, like, they don't just charge it as one membership.
They charge the difference, or they charge you a second time?
So, the cost for premium is $9.99 plus tax. So, but the price for normal access Peacock, which still has ads, is $4.99. So I pay that $4.99, right? That comes out of the account for streaming, so like $5.35 there, and then for the other one, it comes out as $5.34 a couple of hours later. Like they don't just do it as one charge.
What weird tax write-off bullshit is this?
Exactly.
That they're like collecting it as
or
two
is it the fact
streams?
that they get to look at it as 2 subscribers? Like what?
Yeah,
it's a massaging of the numbers somewhere along the line. But my father, specifically, talking about the Chicago series, nothing NBC is on Hulu anymore. Like my father's a big fan of Chicago PD and all of that. All of that is gone from Hulu. So he has to watch it on Peacock. And when we knew that was coming, he's like, well, I'm having a Peacock account. I don't even care. I need to be able to watch these shows, which is another thing, right? Is that it appeals definitely to the older generation who like, this is where they derive entertainment from. Our shows.
Yeah, CBS has gone so fucking dark with like Hannibal that like old people don't want to watch it anymore. So they need a new home, man. NBC seems to be it. Well, I remember back when they had Seinfeld.
Yeah. It's nuts. I don't even know. But then I go over to Peacock, I check it out to see Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and all of Cheers is there. Now, all of Cheers is also on Paramount Plus. So that whole threat that the only place to get Cheers was going to be Peacock was empty. It was an empty threat, right? And that makes sense too, because it was always a Paramount production. So like, I think it's pretty difficult to them to be like, well, we're going to air the show that we own a stake in. Right? It's going to be big money to take it away from us. So you can watch Cheers either or. But the reason I'm bringing up Cheers is that Cheers is 40 years old. Watch as Sejan's beard turns white like Santa. As he realizes how old Sejan is.
That's not fair, man. Like I was not feeling that until you said it. I mean, like telling me Cheers is 40 years old is okay because while I did watch some Cheers while it was still live on TV, I do have like vague childhood memories of that, right? The majority of my Cheers watching was Nick at Night or TV Land. No, Nick at Night, I think.
Definitely Nick at Night. That's when most people our age got into it.
Right. So it doesn't feel too weird. Like it was already an old show when I watched it. So telling me how old does not affect me.
It's fair. That's understandable. That was your response.
Tell me when the first season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine was, and we might have a different conversation.
I mean, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is at this point, I think 10 years old.
I know.
So it's not.
There it is.
Sejan fades to dust. Devon absorbs his power. Welcome to the Xero.
There can be only one.
I don't know, but then so I've been watching Cheers, and Cheers is perfect background noise when you're playing video games or editing documents or things like that. So really, all of this whole 30-minute speech is to tell people Cheers is out there, and if you're gonna get Peacock for Brooklyn Nine-Nine, why don't you watch Cheers instead? Because I've already cried like ridiculous. The 5th episode of Cheers, the coach's daughter is such a heartwarming episode of television.
When does he passes away eventually, right, Coach?
Yeah,
Am I
he passes
misremembering that?
away. He dies between halfway through this
1 and
third
2?
season. He stops showing up in episodes because Nicholas Colasanti is sick. So he's like goes away and is visiting people. So you still get like coach related jokes because he's sending postcards. But by the 4th season, Nicholas Colasanti has unfortunately passed away. And that's when they replaced the character with Woody Boyd, played by Woody Harrelson. And that's,
man, now I'm gonna start crying. Yeah, man, I know. No, Cheers is fine, but back to the Hollow watching of it all, right? Like, there's not like good, solid Halloween episodes of Cheers, right?
No, I can't think of any ones that jump to mind. The best thing that Cheers does is the Bar Wars saga, which was really funny when they got to like Bar Wars 7, because that happened in the 90s before we ever thought there was going to be an episode 7 of Star Wars. The Bar Wars with Gary's Old Town Tavern and the way that they just prank each other into oblivion is fantastic. I love Cheers. I just really, and we talk about it all the time in the show, so it'd be weird not to celebrate the fact that Cheers is 40 years old. This weekend, like September 30th, 1982 was when the first episode aired. So, man, I just freaking cheers, man.
Oh, man. So what else has been going on this week? You said you did a bunch of movies.
I did a bunch of movies. Film that everybody had no idea how to handle, The Munsters, came out on Tuesday, September 27th, Dale's birthday. Happy birthday, Dale. And that was the movie she decided to watch as her birthday movie. Dale's a big sucker for watching movies that come out on her birthday. It's why we saw The Skeleton Twins. And that's
nice.
That movie's terrible. I hate that movie. But we went to go see it in theaters because she's like, Skeleton Twins on my birthday. And then it's just become one of those things like, this movie wasn't very good. But we watched.
Did the theme continue?
The Munsters is fantastic. I really liked it. It feels like an episode of the show. It is an origin story. It's how Herman came to be. It's how they met, how they fell in love. And it is. And if you're a fan of the show, like my mother, she really liked all the nods to it. The dual roles that Herman, Lily, and Grandpa Munster all got to play was a lot of fun too, because they all got to do one role out of the monster makeup. So it was fun to see it that way. And then like real cool deep cut references, like the Tin Man robot from the episode The Tin Man Robot officiated at their wedding, and like how they got Spot, their dragon, was revealed in the movie. Like, just, it had a lot of respect for the Munsters, which again
we've
is
talked
not
before
surprising
because not weird with
Rob
Zombie,
fucking
right?
Zombie loves the Munsters. But again, the world just thought that like, what is he doing with this PG movie? And it's like, oh, he's just doing a Munsters tribute, and he nailed it. And like, big shout out to Jorge Garcia as new character. He's essentially the Igor to the Dr. Frankenstein who builds Herman, and he's just having a blast. His continued like utilization in Netflix original movies has been fantastic, and he is having a ball in this movie.
Nice.
So yeah, recommend it. Definitely check it out if you have a Netflix subscription. The other thing I watched is Hocus Pocus 2. I don't know if you've gotten there yet. But
no, I actually think I'm saving it because I'm going to be home in the month of October. So, if we're going to watch a bunch of Rhode Island on screen.
All right, so we're not going to talk about Hocus Pocus 2, but we do acknowledge that it came out, that it was shot in Rhode Island. You sent a lovely thing from your cousin about how they felt watching the movie. I'm going to sum it up like this. I didn't want to watch Hocus Pocus 2 looking for Rhode Island, but it kept popping up and punching me in the dick. That's how it felt.
Nice.
So we'll talk about Hocus Pocus 2 at some point. Know that I watched it. Know that I felt like it punched me in the dick. There's your teaser trailer for us one day talking about Hocus Pocus 2.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I did is Shovel Knight Dig.
Oh,
that is the game that came out since the last time we recorded, and that's going to be... So here's a cool thing about Shovel Knight Dig. It's the last roguelike game I'm going to spend money on.
Okay.
Because I don't love it. I really don't like it. The only roguelike game that I really, really ever connected with is something like Hades. And
And Dark Souls.
Hades,
You've also very
but
much
that's
gotten into
not a
the Dark Souls.
roguelite.
Yes, they are.
No, they're not.
The idea of diving in until you die and then you come back, and because when you died you had a whole bunch of shit that you could power up and go back in more powerful, is like the number one thing about a roguelike.
But
Is
that's
like you
not Dark
go until you
Souls.
die.
But that's not
You
Dark
totally
Souls.
go. That is
It's
totally
not
Dark
Dark
Souls.
Souls
You
at
go
all.
until you die, until you power up, and then go back in more powerful than when you came out.
But when you die in Dark Souls, you lose everything. Dark Souls is about exploration. But then if I die, right, like if I've gone a long time, Dark Souls is risk reward. It's not roguelite because
That is also what is in a roguelike,
no,
is risk reward, man.
but here's the thing. If you when
You can bounce out early with everything you got, or you can keep going till you lose it all.
right, but you lose it all, but then you can't power yourself up because all of the things you would have used to power yourself up, you have to go reclaim from where you died.
Right, which is what happens in roguelikes, like Undermine, Loop Hero,
I
like
mean, those aren't
like
ones
all
that
of
I've
that
ever
shit.
played. That's the every
Yeah, so
roguelike I've done.
so maybe you gotta play better roguelikes.
I guess that could be the fact, but everyone that I've played, upon death, you lose everything except for the one currency that is used to power up your character.
So like in Undermined, right? You go and go and go, and then at any time you can exit the dungeon, and then you have all your money that you can spend, or you can die, and early on you lose like 60%, and then you can, as you power up throughout the game, lose less and less and less, but you never at a point where you keep 100% unless you get like certain booms and blessings, right? So you go and go and go until you lose all of your shit, and then you can go back to the place where you lost all your shit and pick it back up, and then you have it all again, but you have to get back to where you were when you died. That kind of stuff happens all the times in these games, right? Like this, like, yes, Dark Souls uses roguelike elements in its core gameplay ever since Demon Souls. That has been a huge part. It is one of the most, it is like the king of the genre in some people's eyes. So it's so like we'd be remiss to not like acknowledge that.
I wouldn't even consider it as part of that because of what it is. I mean, for me, the roguelike of it all is the fact that the world changes upon death. That it
No,
is
you
not
can
a
you can
static-
have no, you can
static
have an
world.
yeah, you can have a randomized roguelike, but that is a particular type. That's not the case in every roguelike.
So then those are the ones that I'm going to avoid. What the randomized roguelike is the ones that don't work for me. I appreciate this explanation for the difference there because I would have never considered Dark Souls, Demon Souls, any of those to be a roguelike because it's all about upon death you learn something, where in these games that I play like Hades or like specifically Shovel Knight Dig, dying starts you off at the bottom and then you go into the dungeon and everything you've learned about the dungeon, it means nothing because the dungeon is not the same.
Well, so you are also only looking at one thing that you can possibly learn, and that's layout. But there's other things you can learn. You can learn enemy patterns. You can learn where, like, to look out for certain types of weapons and armor combinations. Like, you can also learn meta shit. Like, you can't look at just like the map as the only thing worth learning when you go in.
Right, but that's what I think. That's what Dark Souls is, though. The exploration is learning the map so that you can
No,
find
you also
shortcuts.
learn how the enemies behave, and you also
That is
learn what
true,
good
yes,
combinations
yes.
of like potions and weapons do, and combinations of, like with Bloodborne, when you know, good combinations of gun and melee weapon and stuff like that, or shield and melee weapon or things. You learn all sorts of stuff besides the map in those games.
I don't know. I guess I learned the map because once I know the map, I can run past everything and then get my stuff back, and then I'm just learning more map. And then I come back once I'm stronger. So also what I'm learning is my play
You don't learn
style.
enemy types though. You love learning like boss patterns.
I
and
do
shit,
love like bosses, but that's the thing is
like,
that like the boss and learning the boss fight. That's I guess you're not wrong.
it's the same thing as learning enemy types. You just don't bother with the minions. That's all you're saying.
I use a lot of Mega Man logic, and you don't have to kill everything to get through a room. So why would I kill everything if I can avoid fights? And the part is that like if you don't avoid fights, you get the things to power up, but you have to leave in Dark Souls, something like that. I guess I never considered it. It always just feels like the type of game where
you don't like randomization. Like that is a fair thing to say, and I think
which
that's
is
where you can come
insane
from.
because I
But to
like
write off an
randomization of things like Link to the Past, though the randomization in that game, which I just celebrated my 6th anniversary playing Link to the Past randomizer, which is fucking crazy to me to think that I've been playing that game for 6 years randomized. Like that one works for me because the dungeon layouts are still the same, and what is randomized is finding the items for progress. It's
Sure,
also
but
why
your
like
way through those dungeons can be random depending on what you have, right? Because if you can bomb yourself over a space here
that's
as
true,
opposed to
yeah.
taking a hook shot there,
But that's
you figure that shit
meta,
out.
and that is technically minor glitching to use a bomb jump. Like that's not an expected way to act. I mean, I say that, but there's definitely a bomb jump in Ganon's
But when
tower.
you're playing randomized versions of that game, you have to do that stuff.
Yeah,
Like that, if
you
you're
might
not,
have
you're
to
not
do
going to
that.
get.
You might, yeah, because the hook shot might be over the pit you need to bomb jump over.
Exactly.
So
That's
like,
what I'm
yeah,
saying. Is
yeah.
like like yeah, but the idea of randomizing levels and stuff like that doesn't work for you. Letting you sit here and write off an entire genre of video games because you don't like it is ridiculous.
Well, I'm writing it off for me. I'm saying that I'm not going to pay money for the experience anymore. Like if it's
Yeah.
something that is included on Xbox Game Pass, I'll pay that. I love playing that stuff. I played a terrible Metroidvania last night that sucked out all of my joy and willingness to continue playing video games. And that game is called Moonscars, and it just released on Xbox Game Pass. And I had some people playing it saying, "Ooh, new Metroidvania," and I just had an amazing experience with a Metroidvania that I decided to turn to instead of Shovel Knight Dig when it wasn't scratching the itch. So I'm like, oh, I'm really in a Metroidvania mood. But then Moonscars, that game's just bleak and not very fun. Are you familiar with that one at all, or?
No, I'm going to Google it and see. So far it has a rating of 7 out of 10, which is means that it's probably something that people don't mind playing, but nobody's gonna write home about it. So I mean, it sounds like it's pretty much in line with what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's really reminiscent of something like Blasphemous, and you know how I feel about Blasphemous. Though, admittedly, Amazon Luna still, as of my last time checking, has not upgraded from the original, like, release version to the 2.1 version that apparently fixes literally every complaint I had with the game of Blasphemous. So,
Nice.
who knows? But it's that, like, sort of gothic stuff, but the game itself is just boring. It's not very engaging, and like I kept playing it and I'm like, man, I like don't want to keep doing this. And it
A Gloomy Triumph is the good review that I'm looking at of it right now.
I mean, I'm probably going to finish it, but like I was excited to game last night. And the reason is so Shovel Knight Dig, you know, it is one of those ones where I guess Downwell is the one that most people have been comparing it to. Not that I've ever played Downwell. Did you ever do that one or?
No, the one that makes me think of is it makes me think of Driller Man, where like you're just going lower and lower as you dig. But then every now and then you get to like a boss and stuff like that.
Okay, I'm not familiar with Driller Man other than I like know the arcade game version of that where there are no bosses. It's just about drilling through the same color platforms.
So you get like so the way that game works is that you get like a map and you so that I'm saying this like there's one type of it, but actually like arcade-esque style, there's all different versions of this. But like basically you dig down until you hit like a larger room, and then you can fight a boss, and then that gives you power to like go into different rooms. And then like different play styles have different things. Where like sometimes you need to collect potions in order to defeat a vampire, or you need to dig in this fashion in order to collect idols as like an Indiana Jones surrogate. So like they play with that thing kind of they play with the one mechanic in really interesting ways, arcade style in those games. But there's obviously then there's a whole other element to it in like the roguelike elements of like if you die then you kind of lose all your shit and you have to find your way back to it, or like you can power yourself up depending on how it goes and that sort of stuff. Like there's a whole there it's not full on that, it's just like the baseline like gameplay mechanics remind me very much of Driller Man, just because of the whole like dig through and get to certain rooms.
That's cool. I've never played that game, and honestly, based on the way I feel about this genre, it's not surprising. But Shovel Knight Dig, from what I've experienced with it, each zone or biome, they use the term biome in rogue games, is separated into 3 levels and then a boss. And the game is built up of 5 separate biomes that you dig through until you get to the final boss.
Yeah.
I've gotten to the boss of the second biome. I have not beaten that boss, and it's totally on me. Like, right now I'm in the middle of a run. I paused the run before we came to record. And along the line for that, I had found an item that doubled my health, but I couldn't see how much damage I had taken. So really, the fact that going from 4 hit points to 8 hit points, but then I don't know how close I am to death, that really doesn't bother me because I don't take a lot of damage in the game unless I'm being stupid.
Yeah.
So, like, to have those extra hit points, and then the game also, each one of the separate levels, there are 3 cogs to find, and if you find all 3 cogs, you can just refill your health at the end of the level. So if I play smart, and right now I've gotten up to, like, I think 11 hit points, I still can't see where my health is at, but I have 11 hit points if I refill my health at the end of each level, collecting the golden cogs. So if I play smart with how I'm currently built, I should be able to roll credits on the game and then probably never play it again. Because it just doesn't interest me the way that, like, Shovel Knight was a game that had the element of when you die, you lose a percentage of your money. So the point is to get back to where you were so that you didn't lose all of your progress monetarily speaking, but the levels themselves were also so well designed that it was about learning the levels. I mean, like, Shovel Knight was a speed game. For a lot of people, it was their first speed game. And it's one of the games that, like,
right.
Yeah.
By having standardized rooms, you can make a game tight, right? Like that is true for sure. And so it's why it's so impressive in randomized setting games, like randomized room games, where when controls can still feel tight, it's really, really cool. And it's for a lot of people, this conversation boils down to the difference between Super Meat Boy and Super Meat Boy Forever, right? Is a lot of people really, really did not approve or like or appreciate the way that Super Meat Boy Forever went because he started to do the randomized room stuff in that game. And it didn't make the controls or the levels feel as tight. They could not get as good as they did at Super Meat Boy because there was always going to be that element of randomization that they couldn't account for. Yeah. And so, like, this conversation of I don't approve of this kind of randomization is, like, not new to the industry. We are not, like, breaking new ground here by talking about why Devon doesn't like these games, but, like, that idea being that just doesn't work for you, like, that is unfortunate and such a key element to the experience of some of these games that it just means, like you said, these games are just not for you.
Yeah. I think the most egregious thing about Shovel Knight Dig, because before I decided to pull the trigger on it, I read a review that said everything controls the same as it did in Shovel Knight. Like, right. So really what you want to be looking at it is the fact that it is a 16-bit upgrade from the 8-bit Shovel Knight. And again, neither of those are true. It's 8-bit style to 16-bit style, because there's no way that these could play on, like, original NES or SNES hardware respectively because of everything that's going on in the background and the way that the actual colors, the bits, what that represents, are being utilized. But yeah, so it's from an 8-bit style to a 16-bit style. Now that part, exciting to me, right? Seeing Shovel Knight in a bigger sprite and, like, he looks beautiful, and I'm excited to play that part of it. But the one aspect of the game that has changed, and I mean, I understand why they made this change, but when I read an article that says the game controls exactly the same, I expect the game to control exactly the same, right? You think that if a reviewer says that, they kind of know what they're talking about, but it's not true. Because the thing about Shovel Knight that I really liked, and is what appealed to me about Shovel Knight, this is Devon Decker coming through to you, telling the truth, is that to activate the shovel pogo, you had to press the down button during a jump. It wasn't a automatic thing. I don't like it in DuckTales that it's automatic, that, like, he'll switch into the ability to pounce on stuff. Like, I think DuckTales 2 did that. One of them switched it. But then if you want to jump, you need to hold down the down button if you want to, like, do the pogo jump. So, like, that's an aspect of it. I really like that they brought the pogo jump into Shovel Knight, and I really like that you had control of when it activated. But due to the nature of Shovel Knight Dig, which is always about going down, when you jump, it automatically activates the pogo ability. And
Interesting.
That takes away just so much control that I felt I had over the character.
Well, and in some ways, like, the ways in which you're engaged, like, that control represents so much. It's not just I want the choice of when to pogo and when not to, but also I want to feel like I'm the one doing the damage, because like the pogo ability is the way that you damage a lot of the baddies in the Shovel Knight verse, right? Like you can't just jump on their head, you have to pogo off their head with your shovel to do so. And so it just makes you feel like you're one with the shovel in those moments, that you have a physical action to do with your finger as much as Shovel Knight has to do with his shovel, right?
Yes. You feel like you're part of it.
Right.
And a lot of it, it's because if I'm just jumping, I don't do that. Like, it's faster to then continue moving and keep doing it while you're in platforming, while you're trying to speed run through a shovel.
Oh, right. It becomes like this really nice like flow of you moving across the level by jumping off of people's heads, but you can only do that by pressing down at the right moment. And so yeah, you feel really good and connected to it. So not only are you making the choice in terms of how to move, but like when you move, I guess, feels really good.
Yeah. But the reason why it switches to that pogo ability is it kind of forces you down. Because if in like regular Shovel Knight, when you jump, if you're not pogoing, there are certain blocks that you can land on. But then if you pogo jump on them, you'll break those blocks. Like, that's just the way that works. So by the fact that you can't just land safely, you're always going to break the blocks, it's continually forcing you down. It's a completely different style of play. And
it's part of the puzzle element of the game that it forces you down, because maybe you might miss going left or right because you just can't get over there without landing. So, and
because you can't land, you might miss out on one of the golden cogs that you need to get the reward at the end of the level.
Right.
And it just feels so strange. But the reason why I think it's so egregious is the reviews that I read, and it was multiple reviews that said Shovel Knight controls just the same as he did in his first game. And it's like, and I understand why you would say that, because in so much of it, it's not like the physics change from something like Super Mario Brothers 3 to Super Mario World, where he's a little bit more floaty and a little bit more slippery in Super Mario World, as opposed to Super Mario Brothers 3, where it's a lot of tighter movement. Like, he does feel the same in his movement. Like, you don't slide when you stop or anything like that. But the big change is the most egregious change, and that is the fact that you have less control over the shovel.
Yeah.
And it's weird. It's just a weird, strange thing. Now, I play the game. I made myself play for an hour this weekend so that I could do it before we talked about it on the show again. And again, I enjoy doing it, but like, I don't like this type of game. Is my ultimate like judgment on it, is that these type of games are not for me. I want a game that is well designed, that like has a map that has been pieced together by the developer so that like it is meant to be learned, it is meant to find the shortcut, it is meant to find the shortest path from A to B once you get like the double jump ability. That's the type of game I want. And to that end, Deal It in Wonder Labyrinth Record of Lodoths, which was another game that I played on Xbox Game Pass, that was probably the best Metroidvania that I have played in years. Well, in year, because Metroid Dread did happen. And as much as I have like weird thoughts about Metroid Dread, it's still a very good Metroidvania.
Yeah, no. I think the thing is like having like a thing that is set, right, is definitely, there's a ton of games that do it. It used to be part for the course. That's how people got good at speed running games, is that things were guaranteed to be the same, so they knew they could do A, B, or C to get through it faster, because they could always depend on those elements always being present. Right. And the introduction of RNG has killed a lot of good games from being speed run triumphs, because RNG can just get you. And it's why people started trading seeds, right? Is to make sure that we were all playing the same thing, that RNG was not going to benefit one person or discipline a person one way or the other.
Or that RNG would punish or reward people the same way. Like, that's the other thing about it.
As I said, they would not benefit people or discipline people. I think is the same concept for sure.
No. But it's also one of those situations where, like, if we're on the same seed, the RNG is the same for both of us. Does that make sense? I'm not talking about like...
Again, I feel like you're repeating exactly the same thing I just said, that it wouldn't benefit or discipline people differently depending on what had happened with the RNG. Sounds like the same thing.
Yeah, no, I know. I just, never mind. Yeah, you're right. I I guess I just hear that, and then like one of the other reasons for the seed of it all is so that everybody is on a level playing field. And that's, I don't know, never mind. RNG has never really been something I've thought about when it comes to seeds. But then again, that's because I'm playing things like...
That's the only reason they exist, my brother.
But I think about it like Link to the Past, right? You all race the same seed so that, like, you all find the bow in the same chest.
Right. So the random generation of those things is guaranteed to not be a factor.
Right. But, then there's still RNG elements that exist in that randomized game.
That are different between each person,
that could
or
be
because they have a seed doesn't because they have the same seed.
Well, but the seed of a randomized game sets like the big points in place, but then there are still parts of games that are always going to be RNG, like the way that an enemy reacts or the way that their patterns structure. Like there are times where the RNG can be set, like to go off of Link to the Past, and that's really my issue. Is that like that's where all of my basis of knowledge comes from. The RNG sets how many times Aghanim is not going to attack you with something that can be deflected back to him. That is something that is programmed into the RNG, but how like Helmasaur is going to fight you and how many like times it pauses and shoots fireballs, that can be random between two people playing on the same seed.
Well, and very often it's not even random, but what it is based on elements that could be different from the ways people played it. If you went to so like there are legitimately ways in order to program like boss behavior or any enemy behavior being like, well, if you've gone through the secret woods 6 times, then this will happen. But if you've only gone through the secret woods this like 2 times, then this will happen. And it completely changes it because they're using a non-connected element somewhere else in the game to dictate the behavior of an enemy.
Yeah.
And you just can't know that stuff unless you're digging so deep and taking and being so kind of in tune with what is happening in the programming. But that is beyond nuts. I say that, but there are people out there that figure this shit out, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
they
there are people who are way smarter than us when it comes to coding. Who have
think about what Devon, on this very show, you've talked about the idea of people who would in early game of Resident Evil 2 shoot bullets into the air just so that the percentage number of bullets fired to zombies killed didn't fuck them in the game getting harder later in the game, right?
Yeah.
They figured out that, this game gets harder depending on how many headshots you land. Well, I'm going to land some not headshots just to make sure that the game later on is not more difficult. Right. So you could call that RNG later on saying, oh, man, this game's getting harder just kind of unexpectedly. And it's like, no, there is actually an entire like algorithm to figure that out.
That's floating AI. It's crazy.
Right.
It's reactive AI is actually the thing.
Right. And good reactive AI can feel like it's random, but that's not necessarily random. That's a whole different thing. Right?
I mean, the way that the algorithm works, it's supposed to sort of ape randomization.
Exactly. Right. So eliminating as many random elements as possible is something that we have always kind of loved in games. But what happens is that the natural reaction to that is, okay, I've gotten good enough at doing it the way that it is. I want random versions of it. So randomization becomes this kind of inevitability at all times, because the only way to make a game so truly difficult that even the best players out there cannot just ace it and then move on is to be changing elements constantly, to the point where that's what people look for in their games. So it becomes the kind of this Mobius strip of like, I don't like randomization in games. I want them to stay permanent. But then you get so good at them being permanent that after a while, what's the point in playing them anymore? So then randomization kind of becomes fun because of the ways that it amps up kind of the difficulty again. But, like at some point that becomes boring because like it's so random that it's not fun anymore. So finding that balance between the elements that are randomized and the elements that are static are what can make or break a game for an individual player, for an individual developer, for across the board a genre. Like this balance of like the static elements and the random elements of gaming have been a conversation that we've been having since Donkey Kong, and people started memorizing barrel patterns and shit.
True. I mean, Pac-Man, the fact that there is the Pac-Man pattern and you can just go through that game and as long as you learn that pattern It's crazy. It really is. It's what Pixels is about. The movie Pixels with Adam Sandler.
I would point to looking at like King of Kong and the ways in which Weeby starts like doing like
Like grease
the
pencil.
overhead
Yeah.
projector like marker shit that he's doing in order to like pattern out the levels, right? And like how that leads to him being one of the best players ever is because he figures out the patterns, and legitimately leads to later arcade games not having those kinds of patterns present because it makes them more difficult and thus eats more quarters.
True. I think it's funny because I always think about Pixels where he's like, there's no patterns in Donkey Kong. And it's like, well, actually, there are, Fire Blaster. It's one of the most understood patterns of the games that exist. Because people have done the work.
Yeah,
But you have to do the work. Yeah.
Randomization has a very key like place in video game creation in history. Like that is really kind of important in a lot of ways. But it's really funny because I actually just watched a video this past week of a dude making a horror game and talking about kind of offhandedly mentions that he has to pattern the way that the monster shows up or that certain elements behave based off of what you've already done or not done, right? And having to figure out like how to write out that pattern. The whole video, it's really interesting. It's this dude Lixian, who's an editor for a lot of high-end YouTubers. He's also a game developer, and he's making a horror game, and it's his kind of basis for learning Unreal Engine. So he's in Unreal Engine 4 is what he's building in, and he's talking about the ways that they use this like visual coding system and how he's really enjoying the ways that he can kind of pattern the ways that the monster shows up based off of what he knows the player has or has not done yet in the rest of the game. And like I said, it's kind of like a throwaway comment when he says it, but he's showing this whole element of it like popping up behind like furniture in the house based off of whether or not the person has thrown away this much trash yet, cleaned this many spots on the floor yet, walked into this many rooms yet. And like it's wild how much of that stuff has to again like feel random and really appear random, but then at the end of the day becomes really kind of set in its ways. And like people figure that shit out, break it, and that's where speedrunning comes into play.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess the final thing I want to say is that Shovel Knight Dig is the last one that like where it's championing the fact that it's that style of game. I'm probably going to try to avoid it. Because as much as I like something like Hades, what I realized about Hades is the fact that you're rewarded at the end of every room in Hades is what really was appealing to me. The fact that, Shovel Knight Dig, the fact that if you don't collect all 3 orbs, you don't really get a reward at the end of each section is so weird to me.
Yeah.
Like it's because you should reward me in some way. I don't know how
it
to
feels
feel
like I mean like Shovel Knight is one of those games that unfortunately has fed a certain part of the video game, a toxic part of the video game audience, the get good side of the audience. Shovel Knight was very much one of those games that they lauded as like the games they could play because they got good at them. And it feels like it's some continuation of that, of like punishment, and like you really need to get to certain areas in order to truly be rewarded. Like it feels like it's a punishing game for the sake of just being punishing to an audience that just asks to be punished. And I don't go in for kinks like that.
It's so strange to me.
It's cool if you do. I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
But that's just not my bag.
The last thing I want to say on that is that that's so true. But I remember getting the platinum for Shovel Knight the 2 times that I did it. And the fact that like I had to get through that game without taking damage to do that, I still never considered it one of those games where like the get good group of people like had surrounded it. But then like years later talking to people how they played the game, and I'm just like, oh, that just seemed like the natural progression of what you were supposed to do in Shovel Knight. Like it felt like it was part of the gameplay loop was, all right, now you're at the point where you have to avoid damage the entire game.
I mean, it is, Dev.
Yeah.
Like that's the point. The game is built to feed that exact audience. It's why it became the thing that it did, is because it was built to do exactly that. And the natural progression of Shovel Knight leads you down a toxic path of gaming.
And I had not realized that until, I'm going to say, like, Spectre of Torment came out. And it was just like, I'm not interested in doing this anymore. I'm not interested in a new Game Plus where the game is harder and then beating it on that new Game Plus without taking damage. Like, there's no fun to be found there. And I didn't realize it was part of it. But I guess that is part of that's part of the Shovel Knight DNA that I had never really examined. So I appreciate you for bringing it forward and answering some of my not answering, but offering a pretty solid explanation for why I'm looking at Shovel Knight turned into more of a rogue style game and being like, this is not for me.
Yeah, and it's because it created an audience that fed that whole mentality, and that mentality really started to buy into. I mean, the wet dream of that mentality is the rogue like genre of like, if you don't get good, you don't progress. And like it starts with games like Dark Souls. It starts with games like Shovel Knight. It starts with these games that are secretly rogue in certain elements, not across the board. Because as you pointed out, like at the end of the day, Dark Souls is very much its own thing. Calling Dark Souls a pure roguelite is like calling Nintendo a pure video game company, and that we both know that ain't true, right? They play by their own rules and do whatever the fuck they want. They just happen to use these elements that are very popular at the time with other games to do just that, right? And with that, like the ways in which that kind of gets people in the door, and then eventually they find themselves in deeper and deeper and deeper holes, and like you end up playing fucking Doom on like what is it like Crybaby mode, whatever nonsense level like high levels are.
Hurt me plenty.
Right. Like you end up in these weird, you end up in these weird like life challenges with yourself to like play these games so hard. And for some people that's fun. Like I don't want to sit here and talk about this shit like this is bad game making. This is all excellent game making. It just feeds a very specific audience that doesn't include us, right? And unfortunately, I think Shovel Knight's a really great example of it doesn't feed a wide variety of people. Because Shovel Knight, the first game, takes the world by storm and is bought on every console that it's available on in the millions. I have not heard many people that are excited about picking up Shovel Knight Dig. Like here we are 10 years into the Shovel Knight oeuvre, and like it's kind of lost a lot of steam because it was so heavily dependent on this really niche style of gaming that just doesn't guarantee a huge audience. I'm not saying it's going to like fall on its face or fail. I just don't think it's going to be the same kind of like world-changing success that Shovel Knight was.
So the craziest thing about Shovel Knight, right, is it came out on Nintendo Switch and nobody was talking about it. I remember because I'm not Nintendo Switch, Nintendo Wii U. It came out on Wii U, and it was this game that I saw, and I'm like, oh, I like those graphics. I like this. I'm going to try it. Played it, loved it. And then never really thought about it again because that's what happened with Wii U. Wii U was essentially the leap year of video games. You'd play a game, you'd beat the game, and then it would go away until 4 years later another game you came about happened to realize.
Oh, I thought you meant the Patrick Dempsey comedy.
No. You think that's a comedy?
Leap year?
Patrick Dempsey is in Leap Year with Amy Adams?
Is that? Wait, I might be confusing that and Enchanted, but Amy Adams is definitely in Leap Year.
Amy Adams is definitely in both of them. I can't believe that they did 2 movies together, and this is the first I'm hearing about it.
It might not be the case, Dev. That's what I'm saying.
But that was the thing. But when Shovel Knight really caught fire was when it finally released on PlayStation and Xbox. And
that's the one with Matthew Good.
Okay.
Love Matthew Good.
Yeah, love Matthew Good.
Matthew Good, who is basically the British Patrick Dempsey. Let's be fair.
If we want to be mean to Patrick Dempsey and Matthew Good all at once. We want to just be mean to everybody we're talking about. Yes, Matthew Good is the British Patrick Dempsey. How's that feel? And anyone who decides. But yeah, it was when Shovel Knight came to PlayStation 3. Jesus, PlayStation 3 was still a thing at the time, and Xbox 360, and it came with the specialized stuff of playing against Kratos or the Battletoads, depending on which system you were on. That was really when that game kind of caught the cultural consciousness. Like, people knew about it, but the only way to play it was to play it on the system that, like, nobody really had.
Yeah.
And then once it came to the more widely accepted, widely played, widely celebrated systems, that's when everybody was like, oh, Shovel Knight. And so weirdest thing
it was more that they played their cards really well. They released themselves on the system nobody had and got everybody salivating for it because people were legitimately demanding Shovel Knight on other platforms because they refused to buy a Wii U but wanted to play the game. So when it came out on other platforms, it hit as big as it did, some may argue, because of the like anti-marketing that they had done by putting it on a system nobody was really into.
That's a good point. Another reason for that, there was also, it was a Kickstarter project. You also need to remember that Shovel Knight was not this game that was worked on like just by people who were interested
Oh,
in
sure.
making a game.
I'm wearing a tinfoil hat
Yeah.
when I talk
All
about
right,
the ways
gotcha.
in which marketing used the Wii U
Fair.
as a tool. Like, but like, it's not hard to imagine that game would not have the success it did if it did not have a certain period of time on a system that nobody wanted to buy into.
Right, but a lot of that clamoring, I just want to make sure that we're being transparent about it. That clamoring for it to come to other systems was from people who had backed that game for those other systems, and then them being told like, well, right now the only way to play it is on the Nintendo Wii U.
Right, it's all part of the same swing.
Yeah,
right.
it's
They
the same
they
thing,
then
but
put
that
it out
was-
on the system nobody has, while everybody's like, wait a fucking minute.
Wait a minute, I paid to make this game, and I can't play it because I don't have a Wii U? Really? Yeah, and then like Steam came much later. Because I remember the Steam release, and I'm like, well, I'm going to buy it on Steam, even though I'm not really a big Steam gamer, but I had already bought it on every other system.
I was going to say, it was on PlayStation 3 long before it was on Steam, right?
Yeah, it was PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 were the big ones, and then it wasn't until it had moved forward to Xbox One and PS4 that the Steam release happened. I was in like Pennsylvania.
Did it have an Ouya release? Am I remembering that correctly?
It may have had an Ouya release. I don't know
like
enough
weird
about the
system
Ouya
that you can only
to
buy
know
at
that,
Walmart. For, yeah.
But that's the thing. So right now, the fact that Shovel Knight Dig is exclusively Steam and Nintendo Switch, like the Steam of it all means that if people were going to be talking about it, people should be talking about it. But if you're somebody who didn't get to play Shovel Knight until it was on your PlayStation or your Xbox, like you're still in that same boat. So the true fire of that game hasn't caught yet. But I will say, I've only seen like one person streaming the game. Looking on Twitter, and on the Twitter of it all, these are people who like sort of built their whole streams based on being Shovel Knight streamers in the beginning.
I mean, if there's ever more evidence that Shovel Knight may not be the hip thing anymore, is that the big YouTube franchise that they bought into to advertise their game, as far as I can tell, was Game Grumps.
That's correct,
and like,
Sajin.
I love those dudes, but they are of a time that is not this time any longer, right? Like they are not the YouTube sensations that they were 10 years ago, you know? And so like having them be the ones to sell Shovel Knight Dig is pretty on point, I think, for the level at which Shovel Knight pretty much hits in the current culture.
Well, and I will say this, that was almost anti-marketing too, because when I'm seeing Aaron from Game Grumps be like the face of Shovel Knight Dig, I'm like, I think I'm going to skip this game. I don't think I'm going to get it. But it was.
I love the Game Grumps. I am of that time, right? Like I'm somebody that's been watching YouTube now for 10 years, so it makes sense that is a thing.
I fell into them and like started watching them. I want to say like 5 years ago, like right before the Link to the Past randomization stuff hit my life. Yeah. That was what I was doing, and like I enjoyed enough of it. But then I like watched some video and. Like Ego Raptor proved why the first 3 letters of his word are ego in it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I don't really need to give these guys my time anymore. So, you know.
They are responsible for a lot of current YouTube in the way that it is.
Oh, I understand that.
They housed a lot of the current like big YouTube sensations when they were just starting out, and like I think those guys do a really cool thing in the world of YouTube. But if you're going to use them as your primary, only source of YouTube marketing, it says something about where your game is.
Yeah, I don't know. It just. Shovel Knight Dig, I'm not a huge fan. I'm going to try to finish it, hopefully by the end of the year, but it did not grab me the way the other ones did. Also, like, look at something like Cyber Shadow, which was the other game that was published by Yacht Club Games. Again, they didn't develop it the way that Yacht Club Games developed Shovel Knight, but they definitely were responsible for publishing that game. And that's a game that after my first playthrough, I was so mad at Cyber Shadow, but then I went on to, like, be the 3rd ranked 100% runner for a time in the world. Like it definitely interested me enough to go into it until it became like hyper precision semi game breaking with the speed running. Like I am
much more I'm much more interested to see what Yacht Club does beyond Shovel Knight at this point. Even if it was in the Shovel Knight realm, it's kind of one of the reasons why I didn't really I didn't buy into the Shovel Knight like stuff until a lot of the DLC started to come out, and it was the other nights. And that was when I really started to kind of like fall in love with a lot of the concepts of Shovel Knight, like beyond the whole video game part of it, but like, you know, wanting to buy the toys and the fucking comic books or whatever nonsense out there to like to get the lore and shit like that. Like that was always the more interesting thing to me. So to go back to the character Shovel Knight and have it be this style of game that I also don't love. I mean, like that's the secret here after all of this. As much as I adore certain games within this genre, that genre slapped on does not automatically like invite me to play that game. I have to kind of find those games after the fact, you know, like there's definitely an element of those games that I also don't enjoy, you know, like the get good concept and all of that sort of shit just doesn't work for me. It's weird that like that they're picking a genre that's super niche. They're using marketing that's super niche. It is a kind of a bold move to go back to Shovel Knight and not do something new. There's a lot of stuff going on with this that reek of like we don't know what to do next. And that's unfortunate, considering how inventive and groundbreaking something like Shovel Knight was at the time.
I mean, the weirdest thing about Shovel Knight was the fact that it kept going. Like
Yeah,
they made so much money in the Kickstarter that they said you're going to get 3 more campaigns and a Smash Brothers style fighter from that. And that was what they were working on for like 8 years to get
yeah,
all of that into there and complete it. And I think it was only like 2 years ago that they finally released and published everything with the King Knight King of Cards game and the
yeah.
actual Smash Brothers game coming out. And that was when they're like, all right, so now we can focus on something like Cyber Shadow, producing and distributing this new game. And then in the time since then, they did Pocket Dungeon, which is another Shovel Knight game. They did Dig, and then their only other new IP is Mina the Hollower. Have you seen anything about Mina the Hollower, or do you not
I've seen
watch
a lot of
G4?
I've seen a lot of fan artwork on like Reddit. Nothing of the actual game itself.
So the game looks like Link's Awakening. It
Okay.
feels like it's a Game Boy style game. I'm interested to play it. I just like I want it here. I wish I could have gotten the demo that was given out to press to like give it a try so that I could be like, is it worth kind of following the hype train on it? Because they got me with Cyber Shadow when I played the demo at PAX, and
Yeah.
playing the demo at PAX, and then like having the conversation with Mecha Skull about the game was awesome. That was one of the best experiences I've ever had. Like, I understood why you would want to try to be a video game journalist in the modern world is for those experiences like that. Because in a way, like, I feel like I helped to shape Cyber Shadow. Because, like, stuff that we said in that exact conversation between me and the developer ended up happening to the game. Because he was timing all of the power-ups. And then when he's
Yeah.
like, oh, it doesn't break the game to bring the power-ups into boss fights. I've told this story before. I don't need to do it. But it felt really cool. But, like, I don't have that connection to Mina the Hollower. I don't have that connection to Shovel Knight Dig because I've never, like, gotten any time with it. So I'm not, like, clamoring for more.
Yeah,
Right?
I like I said, I'm really more interested in what they do besides Shovel Knight at this
Yeah.
point. Like, I'm interested to see what's next because I do think that they've got some really cool ideas and some really cool like concepts in their artistic design and all of that sort of shit hits so hard with me. I love it all. Like like the more that they exposed of the lore to the Knight's world, the more I was into it. So like I love all of that. I've seen what they can do with the Knight stuff, and you know that's always going to be their bread and butter, and maybe that's truly where their heart is and all of that. So maybe it just means that I'm just never going to jive with anything that they really do. But like, I want to see what's next. I want to see what other stuff they can bring to the table.
And now about it's time we see what other stuff we can bring to the table. Because I feel like we've been talking about Shovel Knight for an hour. What else happened in your life, Siegen?
Well, yesterday, Friday was the official last day where Siege had a real jorb.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. One of your state
um,
reporters is unemployed.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, we talked about this a while back, I think, but I've decided to see what else is out there in the world besides just answering phones and getting yelled at by people that have too much money and too much time. No, I'm currently just trying to like figure out what the next step is, right? I've been looking into a couple of different like UI UX programs, and I've been looking into, you know, other jobs that are out there. But but the big thing is that in this, I have really also realized that, you know, I gotta upgrade some stuff in my life, you know, like, and I mean that both in like I need to like buy some better clothes if I'm gonna be interviewing for jobs. You know, I'm still kind of living in like the COVID times. My job sent me home for like 2 weeks, and then lo and behold, we were home for the rest of our lives when it came to this sort of shit, right? And so like I fell into like a COVID rut of like the way that you kind of just vegged out during that time, and I've never had to get out of it. You know, my job went fully remote when I had gone home. I had a lot of people around me that like are very, I don't want to say paranoid about COVID. That's not the right term. They are nervous about and still cautious of a lot of the shit going on around it, right? So like to that point, we don't do a lot of holiday going out and stuff like that. So I've just been like, as a physical human being, just a fucking mess for 3 years, right?
You're still
So
wearing
like,
underwear, right?
yeah, yeah. What's left of it? No, yes, no, yes. Oh man, but like getting that shit back together, right? Because now I have to go back out into the real world and present myself as a human, possibly working in an office again, all that sort of shit. So like getting that stuff on the ball, but also might be time to finally do a little bit of an upgrade to the old PC. And the only reason I mention that is that this is the computer that I have recorded pretty much every, except for maybe one or two that were on my girlfriend's laptop when we were moving. This is the computer that I've recorded every episode of the Say Report on since the beginning. You know, like I've upgraded my shit in terms of the microphone, in terms of the keyboard, in terms of all of this shit. Like I think I started on like a Dell like half keyboard that came with the computer and a Rock Band microphone. But you know, since then I have definitely upped the game in that regard in certain areas, and it might be finally time to do the whole computer itself. So by this time next week, I am probably going to be on a new device.
That's cool. We're coming up on a big milestone for the Say Report. This is episode 298 of like Say
Mm-hmm.
Report regular, and I've always said that by like the 300th episode, I'm going to have to upgrade. So like that's something that's been in the water for me too, especially when I'm gonna reveal it here. The computer we record the Say Report on has 4 gigs of RAM.
See, this is one of the big things for me, right? If I am going to go back to school, this computer that I'm on is at 8 gigs of RAM. Thank God, it's at least more than that than before. And it's struggling. Like I can't pull up like our recording stuff like Skype and or Discord. And like if you need me to look up something, I'm not using this computer. I'm using the work computer to the right of me, which as I hinted at, I no longer have that job. So guess what? That computer is not going to exist much longer.
That
So
explains why "Don't Worry, Darling" took so long to come out.
like I can't. I literally I left work on Friday at 3:45, and I was supposed to work till 4. But you know, 3:45. Fuck it, it's my last day of work. I walked out, right? Anyway, I instantly realized, oh shit, I forgot to put in like A, B, or C into my timesheet, so I better make sure I get that done because I'm not going to plan on coming back later. By 3:50, I could not sign back into that computer. They had removed my they had realized I had left for the day and removed my privileges to even sign into that device. But within 5 minutes of me leaving the job. So that is what it is. And like, I'm not even offended by that. I totally get it. I just couldn't believe how fast they moved.
Right. Maybe if you guys were moving this fast with some of the other issues I had with the job, I'd still be working for you.
That's a conversation for another day, but yup.
Yeah, no, I'm really good at cutting to the quick of the subtextual
Yeah.
stuff being said.
So yes,
Sorry.
but me even with 8 gigs of RAM, I'm just like, this computer can't do everything I need it to do at once. I need something. I need something a little bit newer. I need something with a little bit more space to breathe, that sort of thing. So the fact that you're working on a device with 4 gigs makes me a little nervous.
Dude, I'm nervous all the time. But like I know it's time to upgrade, but it's just I don't really have the time to do it. Like it's like before, like I knew about computers, but then I got so comfortable with what I had and it was able to do everything. I'm also looking at I need to get a new PC because of something like what happened with Return to Monkey Island. The fact that like it required Windows 10 and that just never having been a problem for me up until this point was insane, and it shouldn't have been insane. But like my Dell Optiplex that I like basically scooped the insides out of, kept the motherboard, and upgraded, it can do pretty much everything unless it requires Windows 10 or newer. And then like I also think about like the security concerns of the fact that I'm still on a Windows 7 device. Like it's time to upgrade, and it's I don't know. I'm just so
Somebody could break in and edit our voices to say anything. All of the terrible shit over the years. Not us.
Somebody saw the first
Hackers.
episode of Ghost Season 2. Which was all about our Yelp account was hacked, so we apologize for all of the terrible things that has been said over the past 10 years. They didn't realize it was a public forum. They thought it was anonymous. That show's weird, Ghosts. We won't talk about it. We did a left TV on the top of this thing. That's cool, though, that you're looking at upgrading stuff. We just tracked down the monitors that we're going to get for Pokemon Day 2022.
Nice.
And I'm very excited about that. Nice little 28-inch numbers that do 4K and fast IPS. So, like,
Nice.
it'll look... I mean, even though the Switch can output to 4K, it's still nice to be on something that, like, has 144 refresh rate and things like that. Because it makes your 60 FPS more stable when you're playing a game that is less than it.
Yeah, no, yeah. I will be I'll be happy to hear what you have to say about some of those. Yeah, I've got to figure out what the whole setup's going to be. You know, make some choices about like monitors and all that sort of stuff. You know, because I can't go buck wild. I've only saved up so much, and as stated, don't have incoming money anytime soon. So like, I've got to like figure it out from there. But this is a worthy investment because in the long run, like if I have to take online classes, if I end up working from home again, if I end up having to look for jobs for longer than I like, I've got a device that's going to get me through it, as opposed to this thing where I have to like plot out like 20 minutes before we record that I make sure I turn it on, and then 5 minutes later I sign in. If I sign in too early, it freezes up. If I sign in too late, it goes to sleep and freezes up. I have to then open up Discord, like that kind of shit.
It's so funny that that's how this show works for so long, because like the reason why we started as late as we did today is I had the computer on, and then I got like caught up in doing chores upstairs, so I got back to the computer like 1 minute later than it was comfortable with, so I ended up having to restart everything and reconnect to everything that I had open and ready to go, and I'm like, I'm just gonna run upstairs, grab a drink. No,
this podcast is a house of cards.
and it just keeps getting more and more stories added to it. But eventually this thing, I mean, I wrote up, I've had some time off these last couple of days dealing with some medical issues in the family. Everything is good. It's not COVID or anything like that. And the solution is going to come on Monday and we'll be fine. But with like some of that extra time waiting at doctor's offices and for everybody to be all set, I've started to map out what I want the podcasting workstation to look like. And because I love doing this. This is one of my big creative outlets. We got some fun stuff coming up with the 300th episode, only 2 episodes away from where you are right now.
Yeah, and what is podcasting but therapy for white folks? So, like, this is great for me. Yeah,
specifically for
somebody
men,
with
right?
health insurance. While I don't have any,
it's pretty easy for like men to at therapy, but you want to have them talk about shit for like an hour and just get through it. Give them a podcast.
Give them a couple of microphones and a recording device.
Yeah,
that's been true throughout history.
It's very true, right? They used to call it rock and roll.
Thomas Edison, why did you create this wax cylinders? Because no one will listen to my shit anymore.
But now you'll all be interested because it's magic. I don't know. So that's good.
Created the telephone so I could call you and talk more about my feelings. Stop it.
If we're not face to face, we can say whatever we want to one another. Alexander, I feel like this is a dangerous device that you've invented. I don't know what's happening.
Why didn't anybody stop Al Gore when he was creating the internet in his dorm room in 1987?
Al Gore did not invent the internet. That's lies and slander. Imagine if he did. The internet existed before the 80s. So,
I sewed every piece of netting into my bathing suits. You can't tell me I didn't create it.
Oh
That's
my
my Al Gore,
goodness,
everybody.
that's a
There
pretty
you go.
good Al Gore you got there.
It's a terrible anybody. I couldn't have said anyone that would have worked for.
I can do a pretty good Mr. Magoo, but I've learned that he's problematic. What's that? No, that's not even my Mr. Magoo.
That's not even a good Mr. Magoo. Oh man.
All right, so that's cool that you're looking at getting a new PC and that. I mean, anything else that you want to share this week? Or I have one other thing that I have to tell so that people can maybe begin to fathom why this episode is titled what this episode is titled.
No, I mean we talked about a lot of the gaming stuff and things like that too. And in my searching for new jobs and next steps and new opportunities, I've of course been ignoring all of it to just watch a bunch of YouTube and have just found myself in some really decent YouTube holds lately. I mentioned earlier that I was watching this whole video from a game developer talking about creating a game, but I also watched some stuff about going into like gaming and ethics and developer ethics and the ways in which they play with the players. We've talked a lot today about ways in which games are developed for the player and to challenge the player, and what happens when the developers kind of go too far with that and maybe like get too involved in the ways in which people play the game can be really upsetting. Dev has talked many times on this show about like patches, right? Especially day one patches or things like that completely like change the ways in which players play the game. We've talked about how online always gaming is just kind of here to stay, and it's there because it gives the developer the benefit of updating the game, and I will put quotes around the word fix the game when needed, right?
Yeah.
But what happens when they kind of take that too far, or if they're too challenged by what the users are doing? As we mentioned, gamers will break a game any way they can, just to see if they can. And like what happens when a developer gets mad at that? I've just been watching a lot of stuff in that regard as well. This guy, Spaceman Scott, on YouTube, just put out a whole phenomenal video on the guy that developed Welcome to the Game and Welcome to the Game 2. For anybody that doesn't know, those are like dark web simulator games, I guess would be the best way that I'd put it.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, they're really weird. It kind of it feeds the same energy within us all that something like a Five Nights at Freddy's does, where you have to keep track of multiple elements at once, right? You need to think about checking your cameras, you need to think about checking your Wi-Fi, your internet connection, peeking through your door peephole to make sure that there's not certain threats that are coming. There's a handful of possible threats in this series where you can get arrested by the police, you can get killed by a serial killer, you can get hunted by a dark web cult. Like there's all these different things that can happen if you're not watching your six every step of the way. And the developer of those games, while the games themselves are highly praised, is kind of known for being a bit of a prick. And I'm saying that knowing full well that one of the big things about him is he finds people that insults him on the internet and then like trolls them into oblivion, and like straight up just like has done some pretty heinous shit to some like Twitch streamers and stuff like that, in terms of like wrecking their streams and sabotaging their work and locking them out of games that they put 1,600 hours in and that kind of shit. That's just what he's known for. The guy, I can't even think of his name and don't care to look it up.
Five Nights at
He's
Freddy
a
guy, or
no. That's not the fight. No, let me be clear. This is the dark web guy. The Welcome to the Game guy. No, Scott Cawthon, who created the Five Nights at Freddy stuff, is a bit of a prick in other ways, and he's made well aware of that. So I'm not going to go down that route. But no, the guy that
Taskmaster game developers might have problematic tendencies.
Yeah, but like think about it, like a guy that creates a dark web simulator game and finding out that he's a bit of a 4chan asshole is not that big of a leap,
not
right?
Not surprising at all. No.
Exactly right. Yeah. And so the ethics of a developer like that who creates this phenomenal game, but then it was found out that he eventually put out a version of the second game, Welcome to the Game 2. Or I think the name of it is actually, just to be super pretentious, is Welcome to the Game 2. Like I think it's that kind of shit.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And he apparently put out a release called the Troll release, in which it would ping a certain IP address every time somebody signed in. And I mean an individual IP address for every user out there would get pinged when they signed in, so that he could then find out that somebody had signed into the game, and if he so choose, using that web address, fuck with their individual game. And he could like troll people within it. And this was like a known release of the game, apparently. And like it gets even deeper than that. But like the guy was just a huge asshole. And the ethics of somebody like breaking into your game and messing with you, balanced against the idea of being like, well, this is one of the challenges of this game, right? Is like the idea being that these randomized elements may not always be random if certain people have certain control over certain things. And like, you start to talk about things like consent and these like kinds of conversations you never thought you'd have when you play a fucking video game, but like they're there, and like those conversations have to happen. And like now that we live in this always online world in which we're connected to everyone at all times, like the ways in which that kind of shit doesn't work for everybody because like they didn't sign up for that shit, or maybe you're not properly prepared for that shit. You know, like they've got an online service that is not up to snuff, and now suddenly they can't play their favorite game because they can't connect all the time, or they can connect all the time but it's not secure and other people can get in and fuck their shit up. You know, it reminds me of like the early days of Minecraft when it was all online multiplayer, and like the idea being like you could spend hours in your world creating like your farm and your house or your castle, and then like a rando could show up and burn all your shit down. Right. And so like they introduced really quick the idea of private servers for Minecraft, but like that was not always the way that game was built or meant to be played. Like the idea was that it was always supposed to be an interconnected world that people could fuck with. And like that was the concept that then just got dropped on the floor once we realized what assholes people could be, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just wild the ways in which like ethics has become such an important part of gaming, and specifically game development, because of these types of always online capabilities.
Yeah. I also would feel remiss and weird as at the Say report talking about 1,500 hours in games and losing your progress, not being able to access it, and all of that. Stadia, you know, our favorite guy to lift up and use and play games on, even though we never really talked about it. It's going away. January 18th. No more Stadia. So,
yeah,
like,
I mean, you know, when in the few times that we have talked about Stadia, a few times, in the times that we have talked about Stadia, I will not act like it was few, but it's definitely been far between. We have always talked about it not being permanent, and that being one of the biggest dangers of it.
yeah. I mean, that's it. Is that we enjoyed it, but we knew it wasn't going to be permanent. But the weird thing about it, because I talked to my man on the inside at Google, the one who I said was going to get us Bluetooth connectivity on our controllers, even though he had no ability to do that. I know he couldn't have done it, but it was fun to joke and have fun and laugh, and oh, we were such younger, happier men then. And what really did it for me, what felt so strange about this announcement that Stadia happening, first of all, was the fact that our fear of it being just an impermanent thing being reflected in exactly how they announced the fact that they were done. The fact that people showed up to work that day and they found out in real time that they were no longer happening. The companies who had games set up to release like this weekend finding out, oh no, that's not going to happen, even though you've put all this time and effort and money into this.
Into a Google Stadia version of this game, yeah.
Yeah. Like that stuff was the part that hurt. But then the other thing of it is we always knew that it was impermanent. We knew that it was not going to last forever, that it was Google basically using it as a means to an end. And what they're going to use the technology for, based on that initial press release, like VR worlds and metaverse stuff, it makes a lot of sense as to how that is coming from the Stadia of it. I also dig the fact that we're going to essentially get paid for being beta testers by getting all of our money refunded. That feels kind of cool. But to know that it's finally here, to know that the end of Stadia is finally here, is super trippy. And, I mean, I was hoping to segue off of it earlier when I brought it up. Stadia lasted a year less than the Wii U. Which is also crazy when you think about it. I mean, do you still were you still subscribed at the time that it was announced, or do you not have access to anything Stadia that you had?
I don't have anything. I don't have any access any longer. No, I cut my subscription off. I was doing that thing that you had talked about doing for a while, where you would just kind of every 2 months subscribe for a couple of weeks just to get all the games, and then unsubscribe, and then just to like, okay, well, I don't get to play this one this month, but when I subscribe at the end of the month, I'll be able to play this and next month for a couple of weeks, and then I'll unsubscribe again.
Right.
Yeah.
Which worked out for me because I had subscribed on the 29th, the day that they made the announcement. Early in the morning, it was the first thing I did. And then lo and behold, I might have been the last person to subscribe to Google Stadia.
Nice.
Like, it's weird. I feel like Will Forte in more ways than just what we talked about in the Brothers Solomon.
Oh man, but yeah, they're gonna give everybody their money back for everything, hardware, software, even
Not
DLC, which I thought was a
subscriptions.
weird. Um,
Not subscriptions, and
not
that should be
subscriptions.
known. Yeah,
That's a good point. That
any
we should differentiate that.
purchases. If you
Yeah.
bought a controller, you're getting your money back. If you bought games, you're getting refunded that and
Well,
DLC.
and I'm not sitting here to like fucking play fanboy to Google when I say this, but like it makes a sort of sense that like you paid for a month of service and got a month of service. You don't get
Yeah,
your
no,
money back.
I know
Right?
exactly, but it's something.
Versus and that's easier for me to say in hindsight, knowing that with the controller and games that I bought, that is going to be given back to me, right? Something that was supposed to work in perpetuity, on the other hand, is being refunded.
Yeah. And I get that. I understand that. Any extra money spent, but the subscription of it, and I wouldn't want the money back because I got something for that $10 each month that I
Right.
paid it. And
Yeah.
I'd be lying if I said I didn't already get a service for that. But it is just one of those things. If we're somehow the source that you're learning about the death of Google Stadia, I want to make sure that when we say you're getting everything refunded, it is purchases. It is permanent purchases. It is
Yeah.
not you're subscribing for however many months you subscribe that's coming back.
But you were hinting specifically at the terrible, sad plea of this man that we read about online this week, of the guy from Red Dead Redemption, right?
Yeah. Who
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The thousands of hours in a game being refunded is like there's no refund for that, right?
well, and the really insane thing about it is everybody came to him with like, well, you can use like Google Dropbox or I'm not that's not exactly what it's called. Dropwell or it's some weird thing that would allow you to take your save game and move it to like a Steam version of it. Because there's no way currently to take like a Stadia save file, move it to a PlayStation, Xbox, or anything like that. But since Stadia is essentially PC, you can, in some instances, that it has been proven, offload your save file from your Google Stadia to play it on a game purchased to be played on PC.
There are unauthorized ways to move back and forth. Yeah.
No,
Right.
there's authorized ways. I mean, it doesn't work anymore, but Google had that utility that would allow you to do it, that would allow you to change it. I don't
So for him
remember
to
the
use
name
it
of
now would probably not be under any type of authorized supervision.
No, the worst part about it is I don't play single player. That 1,600 hours that he's apparently put into the game is all on Red Dead Redemption Online.
I just can't believe with the number of services that you need to sign up for in this world, including a Rockstar Online service, that part of that service that you're signing up for is not a cloud save transferable of some kind, right? Like that's craziest
That's the
thing
part
about this whole
and
thing.
that's the thing that I want to talk about regarding it is that what he is pleading is, please take my account that I sign into via Stadia with you to play your game and just attach all my shit to it. Because he doesn't want to lose all the stuff that he's unlocked and all the money that he's earned, which I get. And the fact that, like, across all of the Avengers that I have played, I can at least hold on to my skins. I can't hold on to my progress. I can't hold on to my character levels, which admittedly kind of sucks. I'll admit that all of that is saved locally. But then the stuff like, if I were to load up Marvel's Avengers on Xbox, which I've downloaded but I've never played, I could have access to all of my skins that I have earned and unlocked because that is attached to my Square Enix account.
Well, and I was going to say, because part of that is because at the end of the day, real world money being spent on things. I'm not saying every cosmetic in that game, but there are cosmetics in that game that you could have supposedly spent real world money on, right? That's not necessarily the case with like levels and shit.
Yeah.
Am I wrong about that in Avengers?
No, yeah, you earn all of the levels.
Right. So I think that's the thinking there. It's like we have to, probably because of some European lore, because they're the only ones that ever protect us in this world. But like in when it comes to video games, I'm saying other things do, but let's focus on video games. But the idea being that they have to probably have a system in place because real world money can be spent on these specific things, that it must be transferable. That ends up, they end up just doing for everybody because they're not going to just like cut out America to create different code for it. It's easier just to give everybody the same thing, right?
You say that, but I'm pretty fucking pissed right now about the iPhone 14 Max Pro and any of the iPhone 14s, and the fact that we're only eSIM in America, And
Well, in that case, you're talking about Apple, and they are rich to the point where they
they can
can
do
do
it.
that.
I know, and they're also not European, right? So of
Well,
course
right.
they're not going to be defending us the way that you said
No,
it.
no, yeah, right. But when Crystal Dynamics, who I
Yeah.
think mostly is based in Canada, but I may be wrong about that. But like their whole thing being that they have an international player
Mm.
base and they don't want to they just don't want to go through the trouble of treating people differently for various reasons. Having that kind of stuff in place protects you, right?
Yeah.
This is it makes sense why skins and stuff are allowed and other things are not. And I feel like with the Stadia stuff and with Rockstar Online and all that sort of shit, there's probably a lot of the same concepts, right? Like I don't know if there's
One would
real work
hope. I
between
don't know.
Rockstar
I
like
don't
there
know
is.
the game.
So yeah, I'll be honest, I tangentially know some information about some of the stuff with what's the Grand Theft Auto Online, because of a lot of the RP stuff that goes on with that. And that's the kind of the side of it I'm really into, because every time I sign into Rockstar's online service for Grand Theft Auto, I get killed in 2 seconds and I don't get to play any fucking game unless I go on an RP server and suddenly everybody's very nice and I like that. But then I can't be an asshole, and that's no fun. That's that's a different story.
It's a lot of
But everything that I
of
know about
layers
their
there,
online
Siege.
and there's money that can be spent in that, and so I'd like to think that the real world money that I could spend on that game would be transferable, while there's definitely some in-game stuff that happens because it's in game that I wouldn't expect to be. I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
But this kind of move here, when a service is shutting down, I'm not saying it should be guaranteed, but think about the goodwill you could garner if you did something with this.
Yeah,
Not
it's
just for this one guy, for everybody.
for
Stadia's
everybody.
shutting down. Let's take everybody off of Stadia and give you and transfer your account one time only to a different service. Pick it, Steam, Xbox, whatever it may be. Like you get one time that you can choose this free transfer of your character because this once in a lifetime event of this system shutting down. We're going to do this once. And I'm not saying that because it's easy. I'm not going to sit here and act like why aren't they doing this? They should be able to figure this out. First of all, it's Rockstar. And if there's one thing we've learned is that they will sit on their laurels for 10 years before they make any changes to shit if they can. I mean, like,
And then have you seen Grand Theft Auto 6? No, I'm kidding.
we're not doing that.
No,
We're
no,
not
no,
going
we're
to be
not
part of that
doing
noise.
that. No.
But to that point, like they're not the kinds to kind of go out of their way to do things sometimes, right? And like that sucks, because this is the perfect time for them to kind of prove that wrong, and they're not going to do anything about it.
No, but the other crazy thing is that they're basically a European-based company, right? Will has
New
hosted.
Zealand, right?
They were in Leeds for a
Or
while
Australia?
because
Yeah.
Will for a while was like the guy in charge of putting together their Christmas parties. he was the event liaison who put together Rockstar's Christmas party.
There's some Daniel Radcliffe made for TV movie about them that's probably better than it needs to be. So like go check that out. But yeah, they definitely are subjected to a lot of that kind of stuff. But this is something that they don't have to do,
They
right?
don't have
Like
to.
it's not
Well,
they're not
especially when
required to take care of people like this.
they're the industry leaders too. Grand Theft
Yeah.
Auto Online is $1 billion property. It is the most profitable bit of entertainment ever. And so the fact that they're the ones on top, they don't need to develop these things because there's no one else who's going to ever challenge them on it.
Yeah, for anybody that doesn't really know much about like the Grand Theft Auto Online stuff, like they're basically Second Life now. They are the place where people have online personas and meet people and get married and all of that stuff. And yeah, they've got like the whole heist element and playing the game and people that are out there like fucking each other's shit up. But there are entire servers of that game that are dedicated to people just like being baristas and like waking up, going to their job 5 days a week and going home and going back to bed, and they party on the weekends. Like there are people that live their lives in Grand Theft Auto Online like Second Life really presented a new life to people back in the day. So like that is where they land. And so like with that in mind, as being the ones that, as Dev said, are the industry leaders in this realm, like opening their doors on one of their other services, Red Dead Redemption Online, like being able to take that character and care for it and nurture it in a way that would make everybody else on their service feel better about their buying in, is it just seems like a no-brainer to me. Like again, I know it's not easy, and I'm not sitting here acting like they should do it because it's easy. I'm saying they should do it because it's the right thing to do. And like, gaming, who says that gaming companies have to ever do that?
Well, certainly not gaming companies. If we
right.
if we we're at near the end of the show, but if we wanted to do a full episode on times where gaming companies could have done the right thing and decided nah, that's like 4 hours of content right there.
Yeah, but like I was talking about with like the indie developers of these games, like don't go in the woods. What was the name of the fucking one I was talking about?
The
Welcome to the
game,
game.
welcome to
Right.
the game.
Like looking at individual developers like that, or even like we talked about with Yacht Club and everything that's going on with Shovel Knight, is like at the end of the day, top down, gaming is an industry and you need to make money if you want to keep doing it. There are very few people out there that are doing this kind of stuff, if there are any, that are just doing it just because it's fun. Yes, doing it because it's fun is why they get into it, and yes, continuing to do it why it's fun is the only thing keeping them like alive and sane. But the number of times that this kind of industry just chews people up and spits them out and they are the worst for it at the end is more often than not the case. Right. And just this is no more relevant than looking at all of this shit from top to bottom, the ways in which these companies basically have to say, at this point, we're not in it for the customer because we just can't be. Like,
Oof.
It's scary.
Yeah. Sobering thoughts to end this episode. And a beautiful way for me to segue into, if you're one of those people who looks at the episodes of the Say Report and the titles we give them, and you're like, why did you call it Xero Batagomical C? I'm gonna give a little bit of an explanation. It talks about why so much of this episode has been fueled about some of more of the negative things that are going on in the world. Not like negative views on things, but maybe things that would fall on the bad guy side of a black and white old school movie. Is that fair, Siegen?
Yeah, it's definitely mustache twirly in like a lot of the stuff we talked about
more
today.
snidely Whiplash than Dudley Do-Right. And the
Yeah.
reason is the title of this episode. So, as a younger man, I would play with my imagination, and the biggest character that I would ever create and play with is Devman. And essentially, it's a ripoff of Bartman from The Simpsons, which in and of itself is a ripoff of Batman, and we can just keep going on and down the line. But the thing that I did for Devman, right? Here's the thing about Devon Decker. This is a true thing about Devon Decker. And if you don't know this, I'm sorry. You just need to know. I believe in Santa Claus. The way that some people believe that children are our future, I believe in Santa Claus. In terms of also like the spirit of Christmas and being kind to each other and rewarding good actions and sort of giving coal to negative actions. So when Devman was looking for a big bad, right, like a villain that I needed, I invented Batagomical C Hero as the villain. And Batagomical C Hero, who has been the thorn in Devman's side since pretty much the beginning of the Devman adventures, he lives at the South Pole, and where to me Santa Claus represents all of the good and rightness in the world, Batagomical C Hero represents everything that's wrong with it. So if you've been following along, there is something that we're trying to accomplish before the end of our first 300 episodes of the Say Report. And we needed an episode that started with X in order to accomplish that. So when I went back through the archive, I asked Siegen if it was all right to sort of name check the ultimate evil in the world of my made-up superhero character counterpart, Devman. And that's why the epic-code is Xero, Batagomical C. It's just a ridiculous name I came up with in 9th grade. And now maybe you know a little bit more about me. Questions, Siegen?
I know. I just like that for the next season of the Say Report, we're going to be introducing Devon's final thoughts to the end of every episode.
No, I don't know if it's something that's going to be continuing. It's just something that like this is a friggin' deep cut reference to my own life. Batagomical C Hero. Here's just a fun story. I know we're at the end of the episode, and I promise that we're almost done with it. What he did in the fictional world as Devman was he wanted to have his own champion, sort of like a Bizarro Superman or something similar to that. So he stole the DNA of Devman and created a clone of Devman named Novedneadrexid. I bet you can figure out where that name comes from. But again, Batagomical C does not know Devman's true identity. So, like, that's just what the clone named itself. That's what it decided it. And in order to make the clone evil, because I was learning about nature versus nurture at the time where I developed this whole plot idea, as a child, before he rapidly aged it up, Batagomical viciously ripped out the left eye of Novedneadrexid, so that he would be believed, right? He taught him that Devman was his twin brother, and Batagomical actually has affection and care for Devman, so that's why he's treated Navid as poorly as to remove his eye. So, like, he's just the evil dude. But he's responsible for the Bizarro-esque character who exists in the fictional world that is in my mind when I'm trying to pass the time. This is the most narrow casting we've ever been on this show.
I think there might only be one audience member for it, and it's the person telling you.
Right? I mean, that's the thing. Sometimes I find somebody who'll let me, like, wax poetical on Devman lore for a while, and then I'm just like, why are you letting me do this? Because you need to understand, it's like 20 years worth of stuff for the Devman character, and then offshoots and spin-offs. If I were smart enough to have written any of it down, who knows who I might be. But that's another story.
You'd have
for
the next
time.
Marvel verse is what you'd have.
Oh my God.
We've lost it, Devon. We've lost the thread.
I know, and it's just unfortunate. So if you have your own Devman universe and want to share it, you can find me on Twitter at Devon D. Decker.
And if you also want to bombard Devon about why he should play more roguelike games, you can find him at Devon D. Decker. Oh, you did yourself this time.
I did myself this time, yeah. I like to keep
me.
you on
I was all ready with the
toes.
thing. I had it written down. I was paying attention. Well, fine.
All right, fine.
If you want to give me an ending bit for this episode, you can find me at Siege and Steroic. Oh, no, at Siege versus the World. That's my thing. Man, you threw me off.
I love it. I love throwing you off sometimes. Yeah, tell us how Siege should have ended this episode. At Siege versus the World.
Man, this is why I don't take notes, brother.
Why would you take notes? Be engaged. Be present. Will bring us home. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host, Devon Decker and Siege and Steroic. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.